The dust devil that swirled past her boots might have been the last thing she would ever see if she kept going the way she was headed, Natalie Zimmerman thought as she tipped her canteen over her mare's parched mouth and watched the final drops disappear onto the animal's swollen tongue. The Arizona sun beat down with merciless intensity on this September afternoon in 1883, and the landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, nothing but scrub brush and cracked earth and the distant promise of mountains that seemed to mock her with their unreachable peaks. Her horse, a gentle bay mare named Penny, nickered weakly and pressed her nose against Natalie's dusty sleeve, and Natalie felt tears sting her eyes as she stroked the animal's neck with trembling fingers. "I am so sorry, girl," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion and dehydration. "I should have listened when they said the trail was too dangerous for a woman alone." She had been traveling for 3 days since leaving the mining camp where her father had died of fever 2 weeks earlier, trying to reach Douglas, Arizona, where her aunt supposedly ran a boarding house. The map she had been given proved less reliable than she had hoped, and somewhere between the dried-up creek bed and the canyon that split the earth like a wound, she had taken a wrong turn. Now she stood in the middle of nowhere with no water, no food, and a horse that could barely stand. Natalie sank down beside Penny, her legs finally giving out beneath her long skirts. She was 20 years old, and she had thought herself capable of surviving anything after nursing her father through his final agonizing days. But the desert was teaching her a harsh lesson about the limits of human determination. She closed her eyes and tried to pray, but her thoughts were scattered and confused, dancing like heat mirages across her consciousness. The sound of hoofbeats made her eyes snap open. For a moment she thought it was another hallucination, but the rhythmic thunder grew louder, and then a rider crested the small rise to her left. He was silhouetted against the brutal sun, and for a heartbeat she thought he might be Death himself come to collect her. But then he urged his horse forward, and she could see he was real, solid, a man in dusty trail clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, moving with the fluid grace of someone who had spent more time in the saddle than on foot. "Madam," he said, his voice rough but urgent. "Are you hurt?" Natalie tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She shook her head instead and pointed weakly at Penny. The cowboy's eyes, she could see now, were a startling green against his sun-bronzed face. He was perhaps 25, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his hat and a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. He assessed the situation in seconds, then reached for the canteen at his hip. "Here," he said, kneeling beside her. "Slow sips, not too much at once, or you will make yourself sick." The water touched her lips like salvation, cool and perfect, and more precious than anything she had ever tasted. She wanted to gulp it down, to drain the entire canteen, but he controlled the flow with gentle firmness. "Easy," he murmured. "There you go. Just a little more." When he finally pulled the canteen away, Natalie gasped and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "My horse," she managed to croak. "Please, my horse needs water too." Something shifted in the cowboy's expression, a flicker of respect crossing his features. Without a word, he moved to Penny and cupped his hand, pouring water into his palm and letting the mare drink. He repeated this several times, patient and methodical, until Penny's breathing seemed to ease slightly. "She is dehydrated," he said, straightening up, "but she will make it if we get her somewhere with proper water soon. You both will." He turned back to Natalie and offered his hand. "I am Marcus Thornton. My ranch is about 5 miles north of here." "Natalie Zimmerman," she replied, taking his hand and letting him pull her to her feet. Her legs wobbled, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "I was trying to get to Douglas." "You were heading the wrong direction," Marcus said bluntly. "Another day out here, and neither you nor your horse would have made it." He studied her face with those piercing green eyes. "What are you doing out here alone?" "My father died in the mining camp at Tombstone. Natalie explained, fighting the urge to lean against this stranger for support. I have an aunt in Douglas. I thought I could make the journey. Marcus frowned, and she could see him weighing his options. You cannot ride your horse in her condition, he said finally. She needs to walk slowly. You will have to ride with me, and we will lead her. It will take us a couple of hours to reach my ranch, but there is water there and food, and you can rest before continuing on to Douglas. Natalie knew she had no choice. Pride was a luxury she could not afford in the middle of the desert. Thank you, she said quietly. You are saving our lives. Just doing what any decent person would do, Marcus replied. But there was something in his tone that suggested he did not encounter many decent people out here. He helped her onto his horse, a magnificent roan gelding with intelligent eyes, then mounted behind her. His arm came around her waist to hold the reins, and Natalie felt her face flush despite her exhaustion. She had never been this close to a man who was not her father. They rode in silence for a while, Marcus keeping the pace slow and steady so that Penny could follow without strain. Natalie was acutely aware of the warmth of his body behind her, the strength in the arm that held her secure in the saddle. She could smell leather and sweat and something distinctly masculine that made her heart beat faster. How long have you been lost? Marcus asked after a while, his breath stirring the hair near her ear. 2 days, I think, Natalie admitted. I had water, but I ran out this morning. I gave the last of it to Penny. That was a good choice, Marcus said, and she heard approval in his voice. A horse will die faster than a human in this heat. By giving her the water, you gave yourself a better chance of someone finding you before she collapsed completely. I did not think of it that way, Natalie confessed. I just could not bear to see her suffering. You have a kind heart, Marcus observed. That is rare in this part of the world. Survival usually demands harder choices. They crested another rise, and Natalie could see a cluster of buildings in the distance, shimmering in the heat. That is your ranch? The Thornton Ranch, Marcus confirmed. My father built it 20 years ago when this was still Apache territory. He made peace with the local tribes and managed to hold on to the land through drought and trouble. He died last year, and now it is mine. There was pain in his voice when he mentioned his father, and Natalie understood that grief. I am sorry for your loss, she said softly. Losing a father is a wound that never quite heals. No, Marcus agreed. It does not. But we carry on because that is what they would want us to do. As they drew closer to the ranch, Natalie could make out more details. There was a sturdy house built of adobe and wood, a large barn, several corrals, and a few smaller outbuildings. Cattle grazed in a fenced pasture where a windmill turned lazily, pumping water into a trough. It was an oasis in the harsh desert landscape, evidence of years of hard work and determination. A man emerged from the barn as they rode into the yard, an older Mexican vaquero with silver streaking his dark hair. His eyes widened when he saw Marcus had a woman with him. Patron, he called, is everything all right? Found her and her horse about 5 miles south, Javier, Marcus replied, dismounting and then helping Natalie down. Her legs nearly gave out again, and he caught her easily. They were out of water. Can you take care of her mare? She needs water slowly and some feed once she has had time to recover. See, of course, Javier said, taking Penny's reins with gentle hands. Poor thing. Come, little one. Javier will take good care of you. Marcus guided Natalie toward the house, his hand supportive under her elbow. Can you walk? I think so, Natalie said, though she was not entirely sure. Her head felt light, and dark spots danced at the edges of her vision. I just need a moment to steady myself. You need water, food, and rest, Marcus corrected, not necessarily in that order. He pushed open the door to the house and led her into a surprisingly cool interior. The thick adobe walls kept out the worst of the heat, and Natalie sighed with relief as the temperature dropped. The main room was simply furnished but comfortable, with a large stone fireplace, a worn sofa, and a dining table surrounded by mismatched chairs. Everything was clean but clearly belonged to a man living alone. There were no curtains on the windows, no decorative touches, nothing soft or feminine about the space. Marcus guided her to the sofa and made her sit. "Wait here," he ordered, then disappeared through a doorway. Natalie heard the sound of water being pumped, and then he returned with a tin cup filled to the brim. "Drink this, all of it. Then I will get you some more." Natalie obeyed, and the water was cool and sweet, clearly from a deep well. She had never tasted anything so wonderful. When she finished, Marcus refilled the cup twice more before he seemed satisfied that she had had enough. "Thank you," Natalie said, finally feeling like she could form coherent thoughts again. "You have been incredibly kind to a stranger." "Like I said, just doing what is right," Marcus replied, settling into a chair across from her. "Though I have to say, it is not every day I find a young woman giving her horse the last of her water in the middle of the desert. That showed real character." Natalie felt herself blush. "I could not let Penny suffer. She has been faithful to me since my father bought her 3 years ago. It would have been cruel to drink while she went without." "Most people would have made a different choice," Marcus said, and there was something in his eyes that made Natalie's breath catch. He was looking at her with a mixture of respect and curiosity, as though she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. "You are either very brave or very foolish to be traveling alone out here. Maybe both." "Foolish, probably," Natalie admitted with a tired smile. "But I had no other choice. My father's partner at the mining camp made it clear I was not welcome to stay after Father died. He wanted to claim Father's share of the claim, and I had no way to stop him. My aunt in Douglas is the only family I have left." Marcus's expression darkened. "What was your father's partner's name?" "William Crane," Natalie said, surprised by the sudden edge in Marcus's voice. "Do you know him?" "I know of him," Marcus said grimly. "He has a reputation for cheating people out of their rightful claims. If your father had anything of value, you can be sure Crane took it." Natalie's heart sank. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made the loss feel fresh again. "There's nothing I can do about it now," she said quietly. "I just need to get to Douglas and start over." "Douglas is about 30 miles northeast of here," Marcus said, his tone gentler now. "You will need to rest for at least a day, maybe 2, before you and your horse are strong enough to travel again. You are welcome to stay here until then. Javier's wife, Maria, lives in the cottage by the barn. She can help you with anything you need." "I do not want to impose," Natalie protested, even though the thought of traveling any further made her want to weep with exhaustion. "You are not imposing," Marcus said firmly. "You are accepting help that you desperately need. There is a difference. Now let me show you to the guest room, and then Maria will bring you some food. You need to eat and sleep. Everything else can wait." Natalie wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She let Marcus lead her down a short hallway to a small bedroom with a simple iron bed, a washstand, and a trunk. It was clean and plain, but after sleeping on the ground for 3 nights, it looked like paradise. "There is water in the pitcher," Marcus said, gesturing to the washstand. "Maria will bring you some clean clothes. They belong to my mother, so they should fit well enough. Rest as long as you need." He left before Natalie could thank him again, closing the door softly behind him. She stood in the middle of the room for a moment, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning she had been certain she was going to die in the desert. Now she was in a stranger's home, being offered food and shelter and kindness that seemed too good to be true. She poured water from the pitcher into the basin and washed her face and hands, marveling at how something so simple could feel so luxurious. The water that ran into the bowl was brown with dust, and she realized she must look absolutely filthy. She was contemplating whether it would be rude to ask for a bath when there was a soft knock at the door. "Come in," Natalie called, and a plump Mexican woman with kind eyes and graying hair entered, carrying a tray of food and a bundle of clothing. "I am Maria," the woman said with a warm smile. "Senor Marcus said you needed food and clean clothes. I brought both, and I can heat water for a bath if you like." "Oh, yes, please," Natalie said gratefully. "I feel like I'm covered in half the Arizona desert." Maria laughed. "You probably are. The desert gets into everything out here. I will have Javier bring in the tub and fill it. You eat now, and by the time you finish, the bath will be ready." The food was simple, but delicious. Beans, tortillas, and tender shredded beef that Maria explained was from a steer they had slaughtered the previous week. Natalie ate ravenously, not realizing how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. By the time she finished, Javier had indeed set up a copper tub in the corner of the room and filled it with steaming water. "I put some soap and towels there," Maria said, pointing to a stool beside the tub. "You take your time. I will come back later to help you with the dress. The buttons are tricky." After Maria left, Natalie stripped off her dusty, sweat-stained clothes and sank into the hot water with a sigh of pure bliss. She scrubbed away days of grime and fear, washing her long dark hair until it felt clean again. The soap smelled like lavender, and she wondered if Marcus's mother had made it herself. By the time she climbed out of the tub and dried herself with the soft towels Maria had provided, Natalie felt almost human again. The dress Maria had brought was a simple calico print in blue and white, with a fitted bodice and a full skirt. It fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose in the waist. Marcus's mother had apparently been a larger woman than Natalie's slender frame. True to her word, Maria returned to help with the buttons that ran up the back of the dress. "You look much better," the older woman said approvingly. "Still too thin, but we will fix that. You will stay for a few days, yes? Until you are strong again." "Marcus said I should stay until Penny is well enough to travel," Natalie confirmed, "but I do not want to be a burden." "Burden?" Maria shook her head. "It is good for Señor Marcus to have company. He has been alone too much since his father died. He works from dawn until dark, never takes time to rest, never smiles. Maybe having someone here will remind him there is more to life than cattle and fences." "I am sure he has friends in town," Natalie said, though she was curious about Marcus despite herself. "Friends, yes, but no woman," Maria said bluntly. "He was supposed to marry a girl from Douglas 2 years ago, but she ran off with a gambler the week before the wedding. Since then, he does not trust easily. He keeps to himself too much." Natalie felt a pang of sympathy. She knew what it was like to have your heart broken, though in her case, it had been a boy back in Missouri who had promised to wait for her while she went west with her father. He had married someone else within 6 months. "There," Maria said, fastening the last button. "Now you should rest. Sleep as long as you want. I'll check on you later." Natalie meant to lie down for just a few minutes, but the moment her head touched the pillow, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep that lasted well into the evening. When she finally woke, the room was dim, lit only by the fading light through the window. She sat up slowly, disoriented for a moment, then remembered where she was. Someone had removed the tub while she slept, and there was a lamp on the washstand that had not been there before. Natalie got up and stretched, feeling stiff but infinitely better than she had earlier. Her stomach growled, reminding her that it had been hours since she had eaten. She opened the bedroom door and made her way back to the main room. Marcus was sitting at the dining table going over what looked like account books by the light of several lamps. He looked up when she entered, and a smile softened his usually serious expression. "You are awake," he said, setting down his pencil. "I was starting to think you might sleep through until morning. How are you feeling?" "Much better," Natalie said honestly. "Thank you for everything. The bath, the clothes, the food. You and Maria have been so kind." "I am glad you are recovering," Marcus said. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Are you hungry? Maria left dinner warming on the stove." "I am starving," Natalie admitted, settling into the offered chair. Marcus got up and returned a moment later with 2 plates piled high with roasted chicken, potatoes, and vegetables. He set one in front of her and took the other for himself. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and Natalie found herself studying Marcus when she thought he was not looking. He was a handsome man, she decided, though his face bore the marks of someone who had lived through hardship. There were fine lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, and a thin scar on his left cheek that she had not noticed earlier. His hands were calloused and strong, the hands of a man who worked hard for everything he had. "Tell me about Douglas," Natalie said finally, breaking the silence. "What is it like? I have never been there." "It is a border town, right up against Mexico," Marcus replied, leaning back in his chair. Copper mining mostly, though there is some ranching in the area. It was only founded a couple of years ago, so it is still rough around the edges. Lots of miners, merchants, and people looking to make a quick fortune. Your aunt runs a boarding house there? That is what my father said, Natalie confirmed. I have never met her. She and my father had a falling out years ago before I was born, but he said she was a good woman who would take me in if I needed help. Marcus frowned. Do you have a letter of introduction or anything that will prove who you are? Natalie's heart sank. No, I never thought to ask for one. Do you think she will not believe me? It is possible, Marcus said carefully, especially if you show up alone and unexpected. People are suspicious of strangers in these parts. There are plenty of con artists who pretend to be someone they are not. What should I do then? Natalie asked, feeling panic rise in her chest. She had been counting on her aunt to give her shelter and help her find work. If the woman turned her away, she would have nowhere to go. I will go with you, Marcus said, as though it were the simplest thing in the world. I can vouch for your story about being stranded in the desert. That should help. And if your aunt does turn you away, which I doubt she will once she meets you, then we will figure out another solution. You would do that for me? Natalie asked, stunned by his generosity. But you barely know me. I know you gave your last water to your horse, Marcus said quietly. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. You're a good person, Natalie Zimmerman, and good people are worth helping. Natalie felt tears sting her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. I do not know how to thank you. You do not need to thank me, Marcus said. Just promise me you will be more careful in the future. The desert is unforgiving to those who underestimate it. I promise, Natalie said fervently. I have learned that lesson the hard way. They talked late into the night, and Natalie found herself enjoying Marcus's company more than she expected. He was intelligent and well-read despite living so far from civilization, and he had a dry sense of humor that made her laugh. He told her about the challenges of running a ranch in the Arizona territory, about the droughts that could destroy a year's work in weeks, about the constant struggle to keep cattle healthy and fences repaired and workers paid. It sounds like a hard life, Natalie observed. It is, Marcus admitted, but it is my life, and I would not trade it for anything. There is something about this land that gets into your blood. It is harsh and beautiful and completely honest. It never pretends to be anything other than what it is. I think I understand that, Natalie said thoughtfully. My father used to say something similar about mining. He said the earth did not lie. It either gave up its treasures or it did not, and no amount of wishing could change that. Your father sounds like he was a wise man, Marcus said. He was, Natalie agreed, her voice catching slightly. I miss him terribly. Marcus reached across the table and briefly squeezed her hand. The gesture was simple and comforting, but it sent a jolt of warmth through Natalie that had nothing to do with sympathy. She looked up and met his eyes, and for a moment something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. Marcus pulled his hand back, looking almost embarrassed. You should get some more rest, he said, his voice slightly rough. Tomorrow Javier and I need to ride out to check the herd, but Maria will be here if you need anything. You are welcome to explore the ranch, visit your horse, whatever you like. Just stay close to the buildings. It is easy to get lost out here. I will, Natalie promised, standing up. Good night, Marcus, and thank you again. Good night, Natalie, he replied, and she could feel his eyes on her as she walked back to the guest room. The next 2 days passed in a pleasant rhythm. Natalie spent her mornings helping Maria with household tasks, grateful to have something useful to do. She was not accustomed to being idle, and working helped keep her mind off her uncertain future. In the afternoon, she visited Penny in the barn, pleased to see the mare recovering well under Javier's expert care. Marcus was gone most of each day, riding out with his ranch hands to tend the cattle. But in the evenings, he would return dusty and tired, and after he had washed up and eaten, he and Natalie would sit together and talk. She found herself looking forward to those conversations more than she wanted to admit. There was something about Marcus that made her feel safe and valued, as though her thoughts and opinions mattered. On the third evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, Marcus said, "Javier says your horse is ready to travel. We could leave for Douglas tomorrow if you want." Natalie felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. She was eager to reach her aunt and start building a new life, but she had grown comfortable at the ranch, more than comfortable, if she was honest with herself. She had grown attached to this place, to Maria's kindness and Javier's gentle humor, and most of all to Marcus himself. "If you still do not mind coming with me," Natalie said carefully, "I know you have work to do here." "Javier can handle things for a few days," Marcus said, "and I want to make sure you reach Douglas safely. Besides, I need to check on some business arrangements there anyway. It works out well." Natalie suspected he was making up the business excuse for her benefit, but she did not argue. "Then yes, I would like to leave tomorrow. The sooner I settle things with my aunt, the better." That night, Natalie packed the few belongings she had in the saddlebags Maria had provided. Her old dress had been washed and mended, and Maria had insisted she keep the blue calico as well, along with some undergarments and a shawl. "You need clothes," the older woman had said firmly. "Senora Thornton would have wanted you to have them. She was a generous woman, and she would be happy to see her things being used." The next morning dawned clear and cool, the sun just beginning to chase away the chill of the desert night. Natalie said goodbye to Maria and Javier, both of whom hugged her and made her promise to write once she was settled. Then Marcus helped her mount Penny, who looked and acted much more like her old self. "Ready?" Marcus asked, swinging up onto his roan gelding. "Ready," Natalie confirmed. Though her heart was beating faster than it should, she told herself it was just nerves about meeting her aunt. But she knew it was more than that. She was going to miss the ranch. Miss the peaceful routine of the past few days, Miss Marcus. They rode northeast, following a well-worn trail that Marcus said connected several ranches to Douglas. The landscape gradually changed as they traveled, the flat desert giving way to rolling hills dotted with mesquite and juniper. They saw a few other travelers on the road, mostly freight wagons and a stagecoach heading in the opposite direction. Marcus kept up a steady stream of information about the area, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the region's history. Natalie learned that the Apache leader Geronimo had surrendered just 2 years earlier in 1881, ending decades of conflict between the Apache and the white settlers. "It was a hard time for everyone," Marcus said soberly. "My father always tried to treat the Apache fairly, and they respected him for it. But there was so much bloodshed, so much hatred on both sides. I am glad it is over, though I worry about what will happen to the Apache now that they have been forced onto reservations." They stopped for lunch beside a small creek, letting the horses drink and graze while they ate the food Maria had packed for them. Natalie sat on a flat rock and watched Marcus move around the small campsite with easy efficiency. He had a quiet competence about him that she found incredibly attractive. "What are you thinking about him?" Marcus asked, catching her staring. Natalie felt her cheeks heat. "Just that you seem very at home out here, like this is where you belong." "It is where I belong," Marcus said simply. He came and sat beside her on the rock, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I have tried living in cities. My father sent me to school in San Francisco for 2 years. I hated every minute of it. Too many people, too much noise, too many rules about how you are supposed to behave. Out here, a man can be himself." "Or a woman," Natalie said softly. "I think I'm starting to understand that. Back in Missouri, everything was about propriety and reputation and doing what society expected. Out here, none of that seems to matter as much. It is liberating in a way." "It is," Marcus agreed. "Marcusy." He turned to look at her, and Natalie was suddenly very aware of how close he was. "You would do well out here, I think. You have the strength for it. Not many women would have survived what you went through in the desert." "I would not have survived if you had not found me," Natalie pointed out. "Maybe," Marcus conceded, "but you gave yourself a fighting chance by taking care of your horse first. That took courage and character." They sat in silence for a moment, and Natalie wondered if Marcus could hear her heart pounding. She had never felt this way about a man before, this dizzy mixture of attraction and admiration, and something deeper that she could not quite name. "We should keep moving," Marcus said finally, standing up and offering her his hand. "We want to reach Douglas before dark." They arrived in Douglas as the sun was setting, painting the rough wooden buildings in shades of gold and amber. The town was bigger than Natalie had expected, with a main street lined with saloons, shops, and a large hotel. The stamp mill on the edge of town was still operating, its rhythmic pounding echoing across the valley as ore was processed into copper. "Your aunt's boarding house is on the north end of town," Marcus said, guiding them through the busy street. "The Desert Rose. I have heard it is one of the more respectable establishments in Douglas." The Desert Rose turned out to be a 2-story wooden building painted a cheerful yellow with green trim. It looked well-maintained and welcoming, with lace curtains in the windows and flower boxes filled with hardy desert plants. Natalie felt a surge of hope. This looked like the kind of place a kind woman would run. They tied their horses to the hitching rail and climbed the steps to the front porch. Marcus knocked firmly on the door, and a moment later it was opened by a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked brown hair and sharp blue eyes. She looked Natalie up and down with obvious suspicion. "I am not taking in any more boarders right now," she said before either of them could speak. "We are full up." "Are you Nora Zimmerman?" Natalie asked, her voice trembling slightly. The woman's eyes narrowed. "I am. Who is asking?" "I am Natalie Zimmerman," Natalie said. "Your niece, John Zimmerman's daughter." The color drained from Nora's face. She stared at Natalie for a long moment, then reached out and gripped the door frame as though her legs might give out. "Johnny's girl?" she whispered. "But how? Where is John?" "My father died 2 weeks ago," Natalie said, fighting back tears. "Fever. At a mining camp near Tombstone. Before he died, he told me to find you. He said you were the only family I had left." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, my dear child, come in, please come in." She stepped back and gestured them inside, then seemed to notice Marcus for the first time. "And who is this?" "Marcus Thornton, madam," Marcus said, removing his hat respectfully. "I found your niece, and her horse stranded in the desert 3 days ago. I brought her here to make sure she arrived safely." "Then I owe you a debt of gratitude," Nora said, her voice thick with emotion. She turned back to Natalie and suddenly pulled her into a fierce hug. "You look just like your mother, God rest her soul. I am so sorry about Johnny. We had not spoken in years, but he was my little brother, and I loved him." Natalie hugged her aunt back, and the tears she had been holding at bay finally spilled over. She had not realized how desperately she needed family, needed someone who had known and loved her father, until this moment. When they finally pulled apart, Nora wiped her eyes and gave them both a watery smile. "You must be exhausted and hungry. Come, sit. I will make tea and we can talk." She led them into a comfortable parlor filled with mismatched furniture and shelves lined with books. "Mr. Thornton, you must stay for supper. It is the least I can do to thank you for helping my niece." "I do not want to intrude," Marcus said, but Nora waved away his objection. "Nonsense, I insist." She bustled off to the kitchen, leaving Natalie and Marcus alone in the parlor. "She seems nice," Marcus said quietly. "I think you will be happy here." "I hope so," Natalie said, though she felt a strange heaviness in her chest. This was what she had wanted, what she had been working toward. So why did she feel like crying? Over supper, which turned out to be a hearty stew and fresh bread, Natalie told her aunt everything about the past few weeks. Nora listened intently, her expression shifting from sympathy to anger when Natalie described how William Crane had cheated her out of her father's claim. "That man should be horsewhipped," Nora declared, "but I suppose there's no point dwelling on it. You are here now and you are safe, and that is what matters. You will stay with me, of course. I have a small room on the second floor that is not currently rented. It is yours for as long as you want it." "I cannot just live off your charity," Natalie protested. "I need to work, to earn my keep." "Then you will help me run the boarding house," Nora said firmly. Lord knows I could use the assistance. I have 8 boarders right now, and it is all I can do to keep up with the cooking and cleaning. With your help, I might actually have time to breathe." "I would like that," Natalie said, feeling relieved. She had been worried her aunt might not want her, but Nora seemed genuinely happy to have her there. Marcus stood up as the meal ended. "I should find a hotel for the night," he said. "I will head back to the ranch in the morning." "Absolutely not," Nora said. "You will stay here. I have 1 room available, and you are more than welcome to it." "No arguments," she added, when Marcus started to protest. "You saved my niece's life. The room is yours." Marcus looked at Natalie, and she found herself nodding. "Please stay," she said softly, "at least for tonight." "All right," Marcus agreed. "Thank you, Mrs. Zimmerman." "Call me Nora," she insisted. "We are not formal here." Nora showed Marcus to a room down the hall from where Natalie would be staying, then took Natalie upstairs to a small but cozy bedroom under the eaves. "It is not much," Nora said apologetically, "but it has a good bed and a nice view of the street." "It is perfect," Natalie assured her. And it was. The room had a sloped ceiling, a narrow bed covered with a colorful quilt, a dresser, and a small table and chair beneath the window. It was simple and clean, and all hers. "Get some rest," Nora said, kissing Natalie's forehead. "We will have time to talk more in the morning. I want to hear all about your life, about Johnny, about everything, but for now you need to sleep." After Nora left, Natalie changed into the nightgown Maria had given her and climbed into bed, but sleep eluded her. She kept thinking about Marcus, about the fact that he would be leaving in the morning. The thought filled her with a sadness that seemed out of proportion to the situation. She had only known him for a few days after all, but what days they had been. He had saved her life, shown her kindness when she had nothing to offer in return, and treated her with a respect and consideration that made her feel valued. More than that, she enjoyed his company. She liked the way he looked at the world, his quiet strength, his dry humor. She liked everything about him. And now he was leaving, and she might never see him again. The thought was unbearable. Before she could talk herself out of it, Natalie got out of bed and pulled on her shawl. She crept down the stairs, avoiding the ones she had already learned creaked, and made her way to Marcus's room. She knocked softly, her heart in her throat. The door opened almost immediately, and Marcus stood there in his shirt sleeves, his hair tousled as though he had been running his hands through it. "Natalie, is something wrong?" "No," she said, then corrected herself. "Yes, I just wanted to talk to you before you leave tomorrow." Marcus stepped back. "Come in, but leave the door open a little. I do not want to damage your reputation." Natalie slipped inside, touched by his consideration even as she thought it was a bit late to worry about propriety. They were alone in a bedroom in the middle of the night. If anyone saw them, her reputation would be in tatters regardless of whether the door was open or closed. "What did you want to talk about?" Marcus asked gently. Natalie took a deep breath, trying to gather her courage. "I wanted to thank you. Properly. You saved my life, Marcus. If you had not come along when you did, Penny and I would have died out there in the desert. I will never forget that." "You have already thanked me," Marcus said, "many times." "I know, but I wanted you to know that it was not just my life you saved. You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me kindness when I needed it most. You reminded me that there are good people in the world." She paused, then made herself say the words that were burning in her heart. "I am going to miss you when you leave." Something shifted in Marcus's expression. He took a step closer to her, and Natalie could see conflict in his eyes. "Natalie," he said, his voice low and rough, "I am going to miss you too, more than I should after knowing you for such a short time." "Then do not go," Natalie whispered, "or let me come with you. I could work at the ranch. I'm good with horses, and I can cook and clean, and I would earn my keep, I promise." "Natalie?" Marcus reached out and cupped her face in his hands. "Do you have any idea what you're saying? You have a home here with your aunt. She loves you and wants you with her. I have nothing to offer you but a hard life on a remote ranch." "You have yourself to offer," Natalie said, covering his hands with hers, "and that is everything." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and Natalie could see the war raging behind his eyes. Then, slowly, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, as though he was afraid she might pull away. But Natalie pressed closer, threading her fingers through his hair and kissing him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that since the moment I saw you sitting in the desert beside your horse," he admitted. "But I did not want to take advantage of your situation. You were vulnerable and scared, and it would not have been right." "I am not vulnerable now," Natalie pointed out. "I am with my aunt, I am safe, and I am telling you that I do not want you to leave without me. Please, Marcus, I know it is fast and maybe foolish, but I feel something when I'm with you that I have never felt before. Do not tell me you do not feel it too." "I do feel it," Marcus said hoarsely. "God help me, I do. But Natalie, we barely know each other. What if you regret this? What if you wake up in a few weeks or months and realize you made a terrible mistake?" "Then I will deal with it," Natalie said firmly. "But I would rather take that risk than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. I have lost too much already, Marcus. I do not want to lose this too." Marcus kissed her again, harder this time, with a passion that made Natalie's knees weak. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. "If you come with me, it will not be as hired help," he said. "It will be as my wife. I will not have people gossiping about you or questioning your honor. We do it properly or not at all." Natalie's heart soared. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I suppose I am," Marcus said with a crooked smile. "Though this is probably the worst proposal in history. You deserve flowers and poetry and a man on bended knee, not a hasty conversation in the middle of the night." "I do not care about flowers or poetry," Natalie said, laughing through sudden tears. "I care about you. Yes, Marcus Thornton, I will marry you." He kissed her again, and Natalie felt like she was flying. Everything had happened so fast from the moment he had found her dying in the desert to this moment where he was asking her to spend her life with him. It was reckless and impulsive and absolutely right. "We should tell your aunt," Marcus said when they finally came up for air. "I do not want her to think I am stealing you away in the night." "She is going to think we are crazy," Natalie predicted. "Probably," Marcus agreed. "But maybe she will understand. Sometimes you just know when something is right." They found Nora in the kitchen, cleaning up from supper. She took one look at their joined hands and the expressions on their faces and sighed. "I suppose you're going to tell me you are running off together," she said. "Not running off, Nurars," Marcus corrected. "But yes, I am asking Natalie to marry me. I know we have not known each other long, but I love her and I want to spend my life with her. I promise I will take care of her and make her happy." Nora looked at Natalie. "Is this what you want? Truly?" "It is," Natalie said without hesitation. "I know it seems sudden, but Marcus is a good man, Aunt Nora, and I love him too." Nora was quiet for a moment, then she smiled. "Your father was impulsive too. He married your mother 3 weeks after meeting her, and they were happy together until the day she died. Who am I to stand in the way of young love?" She came over and hugged Natalie tightly. "But you have to promise to visit me. I just found you, and I'm not ready to lose you already." "I promise," Natalie said, hugging her back, "and you will come to the ranch too. Often. You are family." "When do you want to get married?" Nora asked, looking between them. "As soon as possible," Marcus said. "Tomorrow, if we can find a minister who will do it." "Father Miguel at the Catholic Church will marry you," Nora said. "He's a kind man and not too fussy about paperwork. I will talk to him first thing in the morning." And so, less than 24 hours after arriving in Douglas, Natalie found herself standing in a small adobe church with Marcus beside her, exchanging vows before Father Miguel and a handful of witnesses that included Nora, Javier, and Maria, who had ridden into town when Marcus sent word, and a few of Nora's boarders who had been charmed by the romantic story. Natalie wore the blue calico dress that had belonged to Marcus's mother, and Maria had woven wildflowers into her dark hair. Marcus wore his best shirt and had shaved, though Natalie thought he looked just as handsome with stubble. When Father Miguel pronounced them husband and wife, and Marcus kissed her, Natalie felt like the luckiest woman alive. They celebrated with a simple dinner at the boarding house, and Nora gave them her blessing along with a beautiful handmade quilt as a wedding present. "It belonged to my mother," she said, pressing it into Natalie's hands. "She would have wanted you to have it." As the sun set, Marcus and Natalie rode out of Douglas together, heading back toward the ranch. This time, Natalie rode beside Marcus instead of in front of him, and Penny kept pace easily with his gelding. "No regrets?" Marcus asked as the town disappeared behind them. "None," Natalie said truthfully. "You?" "Not a single one," Marcus replied. He reached over and took her hand, and they rode like that for a while, fingers intertwined, as the desert stars began to appear overhead. They made camp that night beside the same creek where they had stopped for lunch on the way to Douglas. Marcus built a fire while Natalie unsaddled the horses and set out their bedrolls. It felt natural and right, working together like this. And Natalie thought she could happily spend the rest of her life doing exactly this. After they ate, they sat by the fire, and Marcus pulled Natalie close against his side. "Tell me something about yourself that I do not know," he said. Natalie thought for a moment. "I've always wanted to learn to read the stars. My father knew some of the constellations, but he died before he could teach me all of them." "I can teach you," Marcus said. He pointed up at the sky. "See those 7 bright stars there? That is the Big Dipper. And if you follow the 2 stars at the end of the cup, they point to the North Star. As long as you can find the North Star, you will never be lost." "Show me more," Natalie said, and Marcus spent the next hour pointing out constellations and telling her the stories behind them. Natalie listened, but she was more aware of the warmth of his body against hers, the rumble of his voice in his chest, the way his arm held her secure. "Your turn," she said finally. "Tell me something I do not know about you." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I was engaged before," he said. "Her name was Sarah. She was the daughter of a rancher near Douglas. We were supposed to get married, but a week before the wedding, she ran off with a gambler who had been passing through town. She left me a note saying she could not face a life stuck on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. She wanted excitement and adventure, not cattle and dust." "I'm sorry," Natalie said, squeezing his hand. "That must have hurt terribly." "It did," Marcus admitted. "For a long time I was angry and bitter. I threw myself into work and told myself I was better off alone. But then I found you in the desert and everything changed. You could have given up out there, Natalie. You could have panicked or fallen apart, but instead you took care of your horse and held on to hope. That took courage. And when I brought you to the ranch, you did not complain about the simplicity or the isolation. You helped Maria, you talked to me about books and ideas, you fit into my life like you had always been there. You made me realize that Sarah leaving was not the tragedy I thought it was. It was a blessing because it meant I was free when I found you." Natalie turned in his arms and kissed him. "I love you," she said against his lips. "I know we have not said it enough, but I do. I love you, Marcus Thornton." "I love you too," Marcus said, "more than I thought possible after such a short time. You are everything I did not know I needed." They made love for the first time that night under the stars, and it was tender and sweet, and everything Natalie had ever dreamed of. Marcus was gentle with her, patient and caring, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, they lay wrapped in each other's arms in their shared bedroll, listening to the crackling of the fire and the distant howl of a coyote. "Welcome home, Mrs. Thornton," Marcus whispered into her hair. "Home," Natalie repeated, savoring the word. She had spent so much of her life feeling rootless and adrift, moving from place to place with her father as he chased mining claims. But lying here in Marcus's arms under the vast Arizona sky, she finally understood what home really meant. It was not a place. It was a person. It was this feeling of belonging, of being loved and wanted and valued for exactly who you were. They arrived back at the ranch the next afternoon, and Maria and Javier greeted them with whoops of joy and congratulations. Maria had already prepared the master bedroom for them, clearing out Marcus's bachelor clutter and adding feminine touches like fresh flowers and pretty curtains. "I knew it would happen," Maria said, beaming at them both. "From the moment Senor Marcus brought you here, I knew. The way he looked at you like you were something precious. I have not seen him look at anyone like that before." Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Natalie threw herself into learning everything she could about ranching, from riding the range to mending fences to helping with the branding. She discovered she had a natural talent for working with cattle and horses, and Marcus often said she had been born to this life. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch and watch the sunset, talking about their days and making plans for the future. Marcus wanted to expand the herd and maybe buy the adjacent property if it ever came up for sale. Natalie suggested they start a small garden so they could grow their own vegetables, and Maria was thrilled to help her plan it. Nora visited frequently, usually staying for a few days at a time. She and Natalie grew close, and Natalie loved hearing stories about her father as a young boy. It helped ease the ache of his loss, knowing that someone else remembered and loved him. 6 months after their wedding, Natalie realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was sure before telling Marcus, and when she finally did, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to have a baby," he said, setting her down gently and placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby, Natalie. Our baby." "Are you happy?" Natalie asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Marcus said. He kissed her softly. "Thank you for this, for everything, for choosing me, for loving me, for building this life with me." "Thank you for finding me in the desert," Natalie replied. "Thank you for sharing your water with Penny and me. Thank you for seeing past a dusty, desperate woman to the person I could become." "You were always that person," Marcus said. "I just helped you find your way." Their son was born the following spring on a warm April morning in 1884. Marcus paced the porch while Maria and Nora attended to Natalie, and when he finally heard the baby's cry, he burst into the bedroom despite Maria's protests that he should wait. "It is a boy," Nora announced, placing the tiny, squalling bundle into Marcus's arms, a healthy, strong boy. Marcus looked down at his son with wonder, then over at Natalie, who was exhausted but smiling. "He is perfect," he said hoarsely, "just like his mother." They named him John after Natalie's father, with the middle name Daniel after Marcus's father. Little Johnny, as they called him, was a happy baby with his mother's dark hair and his father's green eyes. He brought even more joy and laughter to the ranch, and watching Marcus with their son made Natalie fall even more in love with her husband. 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Rose, after Nora's boarding house. She was a tiny thing with blonde hair that no one could explain until Nora mentioned that their mother had been blonde. Rose was followed 2 years after that by another boy, whom they named Thomas. The ranch prospered under Marcus's management and Natalie's support. They bought the adjacent property when it came up for sale, doubling the size of their land. Marcus hired more ranch hands, and Natalie started raising chickens and expanded her garden into a proper farm that provided food for everyone on the ranch. Through it all, their love only grew deeper. They faced challenges together, from droughts to sick cattle to the normal struggles of raising 3 energetic children. But they always faced them as a team, supporting each other through good times and bad. On their 10th anniversary, Marcus took Natalie back to the spot where he had first found her. They rode out together, leaving the children with Maria and Javier, and stood looking at the empty desert landscape. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had taken a different route that day?" Marcus asked, pulling Natalie close. "No," Natalie said firmly, "because you did not take a different route. You found me exactly when you were supposed to. I believe that with all my heart. We were meant to find each other, Marcus. The desert brought us together." "The desert nearly killed you," Marcus pointed out. "But it did not," Natalie said. Instead, it brought me to you. It gave me everything I never knew I wanted: a home, a family, a love that fills me up from the inside out. I would go through it all again, every terrible moment, if it meant ending up here with you. Marcus kissed her, slow and sweet, and full of the love that had only deepened over the years. I love you, Natalie Thornton. Thank you for giving your horse that last water. Thank you for holding on long enough for me to find you. Thank you for every single day since. I love you too, Natalie said. Thank you for sharing your canteen with us both. Thank you for seeing me, for valuing me, for choosing me. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, as the sun began to set in that same blaze of orange and gold that had marked their first evening together. In the distance, they could see the ranch buildings, see the smoke rising from the chimney, imagine their children playing in the yard under Maria's watchful eye. It had all started here, in this desolate place, with an act of desperate kindness, and a cowboy who understood that character was revealed in how you treated those who were vulnerable. From that moment had grown a love that sustained them both, a partnership that made them stronger together than they could ever be apart. As they rode back to the ranch together, side by side as always, Natalie thought about the scared, desperate girl she had been 10 years ago, giving her horse the last of her water and preparing to die. She could never have imagined then what her life would become. She could never have pictured the man riding beside her, the children waiting at home, the deep sense of belonging and purpose that filled her days. Life on the ranch was never easy. The Arizona Territory remained harsh and demanding, testing them constantly with drought and heat and all the challenges of living in such a remote place. But Natalie would not have traded it for anything. This wild, beautiful land had given her everything that mattered. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Johnny grew into a tall, serious boy who loved working with his father on the ranch. Rose was creative and stubborn, always getting into mischief, but charming her way out of trouble. Thomas was the quiet one, content to spend hours watching the horses and cattle, seeming to understand them in ways that amazed everyone. When Johnny turned 15, Marcus started teaching him the business side of ranching, preparing him to eventually take over. "This land will be yours someday," Marcus told his son. "Yours and your brothers and sisters. I want you to understand what it takes to keep it thriving." But there was no urgency in Marcus's words. He was healthy and strong, still capable of a full day's work in the saddle. He and Natalie often joked that they would both work the ranch until they were too old to climb on a horse, and even then they would probably find a way to keep going. Nora remained a constant presence in their lives, visiting several times a year and spoiling her niece's children outrageously. She eventually sold the boarding house in Douglas and moved into a small cottage on the ranch property that Marcus and Javier built for her. "I am getting too old to run that place," she said, "and I want to spend my remaining years with family." Having Nora nearby was a blessing. She helped with the children and the household, and her stories about the past kept Natalie's father alive in all their hearts. Johnny, Rose, and Thomas grew up knowing their grandfather through Nora's memories, understanding the courage it had taken for him to come west and try to build a life in the harsh mining camps. The ranch became known throughout the territory as one of the most successful and well-run operations in Arizona. Marcus gained a reputation for fairness and integrity, and people came from all over seeking his advice or hoping to work for him. He always credited Natalie with much of their success, telling anyone who would listen that she was the true heart of the ranch. On their 20th anniversary, their children surprised them with a party. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, filling the ranch with laughter and music. As Natalie danced with Marcus under the stars, she thought about how far they had come from that desperate day in the desert. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, pulling her closer. "How lucky I am," Natalie said. "How blessed." "I was prepared to die that day, Marcus. I had accepted it. And then you appeared like a miracle, and everything changed." "You changed my life just as much as I changed yours," Marcus said. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working myself to exhaustion to avoid feeling anything. You reminded me how to live, how to love, how to find joy in simple things. You made me whole again." "We made each other whole," Natalie corrected. "That is what love does. It fills in the broken places and makes us better than we were alone." As the night wore on and their guests finally departed, Natalie and Marcus sat on their porch, watching the stars and listening to the peaceful sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. Inside, their children were asleep, and Nora was in her cottage. The cattle were safe in their pastures, the horses content in the barn. Everything was exactly as it should be. "Do you remember what I said to you that first night at the ranch?" Marcus asked. "About the desert being honest?" "I remember," Natalie said. "I think that is why we work so well together," Marcus mused. "We are honest with each other, about our feelings, our fears, our dreams. There are no pretenses between us, no games, just truth and trust and love." "Always," Natalie agreed. She rested her head on his shoulder, content and peaceful. Always truth and trust and love. The years rolled on, bringing more grandchildren as Johnny married a sweet girl from Douglas and started a family of his own. Rose met a rancher's son from New Mexico and settled on a property a day's ride away, close enough to visit regularly but far enough to build her own life. Thomas, to everyone's surprise, became a veterinarian, studying in California before returning to the ranch to care for the animals he had always loved. Marcus and Natalie aged gracefully together, silver threading through their hair, lines deepening around their eyes from years of squinting into the sun and laughing together. They still rode out together most mornings when their health allowed, checking on the herd and enjoying the quiet companionship that came from decades of marriage. On a warm evening in the autumn of 1913, 30 years after Marcus had found Natalie in the desert, they sat together on their porch as they had done countless times before. Marcus's health had been failing lately, and they both knew their time together was growing short. But there was no fear in that knowledge, only acceptance and gratitude for the life they had shared. "If I could go back and change anything," Marcus said quietly, holding Natalie's weathered hand in his, "I would not. Every moment, every choice, every challenge led us here. And here is exactly where I want to be." "With me?" Natalie said softly. "Always with you," Marcus confirmed. "From the moment I saw you giving that mare your last water, I knew you were someone special. I just did not know yet that you were everything." Natalie felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of profound gratitude for a life well lived, for love that had sustained them through 3 decades, for the family they had built and the legacy they were leaving behind. Marcus passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks later, with Natalie holding his hand. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched over the years. But for Natalie, the most important mourners were their children and grandchildren, all of whom carried Marcus's integrity and kindness forward into the world. Natalie lived for another 5 years after Marcus's death, surrounded by family on the ranch they had built together. She spent her days telling stories to her grandchildren, teaching them about the land and the animals and the importance of treating all creatures with kindness. She told them about their grandfather, about how he had saved her life, and then given her a reason to live it fully. On a spring morning in 1918, Natalie passed away in the same bed where she and Marcus had slept for 35 years. Her children were with her, holding her hands and telling her how much they loved her. Her last words were, "Tell your father I'm coming home." They buried her next to Marcus on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land they had loved for eternity. On the shared headstone, Johnny had inscribed the story that had become family legend. He found her giving her horse her last water. The cowboy shared his canteen with them both, and from that moment grew a love that changed everything. The ranch remained in the Thornton family for generations, passed down through Johnny's line and then through Rose's and Thomas's children. Each generation added their own chapter to the story, but they never forgot the foundation that Marcus and Natalie had built. The tale of how their love began was told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the simplest acts of kindness. And somewhere in the vast Arizona desert, where the wind still howls and the sun still beats down mercilessly and the land still tests everyone who tries to tame it, the spirit of that love endures. It lives in the values the Thornton family continues to uphold, in the kindness they show to strangers, in their understanding that character is revealed not in comfort, but in crisis. Marcus and Natalie's story became more than just family history. It became a testament to the transformative power of compassion, the courage it takes to love fully, and the truth that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually the doorways to our greatest blessings. What began with a desperate woman giving her horse the last drops of water and a cowboy who chose to share his canteen became a legacy of love that touched countless lives across generations. Their great-great-grandchildren still live on the ranch today, still work the land, still honor the memory of the couple who started it all with nothing but love and determination. And sometimes on quiet evenings when the sun sets in that spectacular blaze of orange and gold, ranch hands swear they can see two riders on the horizon, riding side by side the way Marcus and Natalie always did, together in life, together in death, and together forever in the hearts of all who knew their story. The desert that nearly killed Natalie ultimately gave her everything worth living for, and the cowboy who shared his canteen with a desperate woman and her horse received in return a love that filled his life with joy and purpose until his final day. It was a simple act with profound consequences, proof that in the harsh beauty of the Wild West, the most valuable commodity was not gold or land or water, but human kindness and the connections it forged between souls. Their story reminds us all that we never know when a simple choice to help someone in need might change not just their life, but our own. Marcus could have ridden past that day. He could have saved his water for himself and his horse, but he stopped, he shared, and in doing so, he found the other half of his heart. And Natalie, by choosing to give her horse that last water instead of drinking it herself, revealed the character that would make her the perfect partner for a man who valued integrity above all else. In the end, theirs was not just a love story, it was a story about what it means to be truly human, to choose compassion over self-preservation, to see value in others even when they have nothing material to offer. It was about building something lasting in an unforgiving landscape, about family and legacy and the ripples that spread out from every act of genuine kindness. And it all began on a desperate afternoon in September 1883, when a cowboy named Marcus Thornton crested a rise and saw a young woman named Natalie Zimmerman pouring the last of her water into her horse's parched mouth. In that moment, both their fates were sealed. The desert had brought them together, and love would keep them together through all the years that followed, creating a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Their children and grandchildren and all who came after never forgot the lesson at the heart of Marcus and Natalie's story, that true wealth is measured not in cattle or land or gold, but in the love we give and receive, in the lives we touch, and in the kindness we show to those who need it most. That lesson, born in the harsh Arizona desert and nurtured through decades of partnership and devotion, became the foundation of the Thornton family legacy. And so the story ends where it began, in the desert, with an act of compassion that changed two lives and created ripples that spread across generations. Marcus found Natalie giving her horse her last water. The cowboy shared his canteen with them both. And from that simple moment of shared humanity grew a love story for the ages, a testament to the transformative power of kindness and the enduring strength of two hearts that chose to beat as one.